Hi everyone, Searing Frost here in the Python library. Today we'll be checking out the JSON library, which is part of the standard library. JSON is JavaScript Object Notation, and it is a data interchange format used widely on the web and elsewhere. The nature of JavaScript is dynamic, and Python works well for parsing and working with JSON. The standard library of Python has a wonderful JSON module that makes working with JSON very simple. JSON maps nicely to Python objects when parsed. When translating Python to JSON, this process is reversible. However, more complex Python objects, like datetime or named tuples, will not translate without custom behavior specified. Here is a table of the basic translations. The main operations used with the JSON library are loads and dumps. Loads takes in a string of JSON and parses it into the corresponding Python objects. Dumps is the reverse. It takes a Python object and serializes it into a string of JSON. You'll often receive JSON responses from web servers and parse them with loads. Then you can create a Python object and stringify it with dumps to send back a response. First, we just import JSON. Then we can create a string of some JSON. Let's add keys and an array and a Boolean. I like using single quotes, especially for JSON strings, because then you don't need to escape the double quotes. We can then use json.loads to get the equivalent Python object. Now we can operate on the Python object with our normal Python syntax. We can add a new key, or append to the array, which is now a Python list. We can create a new JSON string using json.dumps and passing it the Python object. And it results in the JSON version of our Python object. Another nice feature of dumps is the ability to pretty print with the indent parameter. Let's specify a number for the indentation, and the JSON string will be nicely formatted for human-readable output. Let's create a simple Python dictionary, then output it with an indent of 4. Some objects are not directly translatable into JSON. Datetime objects are a great example and will come up often. Let's create a datetime object of now. Then, let's try to turn it into JSON with json.dumps. Unfortunately, we get a type error because datetime objects aren't JSON serializable. The solution to creating JSON strings with datetime and other complex objects is to subclass the JSON encoder class and implement a default method that returns a Python object that can be encoded. First, we need to create a datetime encoder class that inherits from JSON encoder. Then, we define our own default method that takes an object. We want to check only for datetime objects. For our datetime object, let's turn it into a dictionary with a key of datetime_now and a string representation of the datetime object, which is JSON serializable. Now we can create a datetime encoder object and encode our datetime now object into JSON. Thanks for joining me in the Python library for this look at JSON. JSON is used basically everywhere on the web, and Python is a great tool for working with it. Links to the code and my blog post on JSON are in the description. I'll see everyone next time.